Introducing Nose to Tail, a podcast where we explore the world of aviation lifecycle solutions, insights, and more. Presented by Jet Midwest.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Nose to Tail podcast. I'm your host, Patrick Kraus, COO at Jet Midwest. I'm here with Ralph from ERP.aero. Ralph, how you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you for asking, and thank you for having me on.
No, absolutely. You know, ERP.aero is a technology company, right, in the aviation sector. And for those of you who don't know Ralph, Ralph, you can give us an opportunity to give us a little background of how you got started in both the technology and the aviation sector.
Absolutely. I'm gonna make a very long story short enough in order for us to be able to talk about this right now. I went to school for psychology. I got into finance after psychology. Afterwards, I owned a business, which I got out of in 2007. And just by dumb luck, I ended up at PartsBase in September of 2007. And my plan at the time, as I tell everybody, was to just be there temporarily in order for me to find something else. And it ended up being a 15 or 16-year stay. In which I got introduced to aviation. I got introduced to a lot of people that I probably would not have crossed paths with. I left that company in 2022, and early last year, I got reacquainted with ERP.aero. And one of the first things that came to mind was that I really liked the people that were there, which is very, very important to me. And number two, from a selfish standpoint, I saw an opportunity similar to the one that I had seen with PartsBase early on, and I wanted to be a part of it. So it was just a natural thing for me to sort of say, I want to be a piece of this, or I want a part of this. And that's basically the 40,000-foot overview.
Very nice. So you're coming up on your one-year anniversary as the CEO of ERP, is that correct?
Yes, I am.
No, congratulations. 1 year doing anything in this world sometimes is looked at as a milestone, and we'll take it as a minor one. And I love your enthusiasm. We see this a lot in aviation. Again, you've been around a couple of years here in the industry. Once you kind of get into this world, it's so dynamic and it's fun. And there's always something new around the corner. And if you don't think there's something new, it's going to hit you in the face, quite literally sometimes. So it's such an awesome industry itself. Yeah. So maybe talk to us a little bit about how you would describe ERP.aero. What services are you providing? What really is that to the marketplace?
Plainly, I'll put it as plainly as I can. ERP.aero, number one, is an aviation technology company. Just like the name says, it is an ERP for aviation suppliers and companies and other companies within aviation that really want to get better control of their business. It is an all-inclusive solution that offers our customers and hopefully future customers an ability to manage 100% of their business in the same application on the same platform. So that was part of the attraction for me. So it didn't need helpers. It didn't need third parties. It contained the solution in and of itself. And we're able to take care of our customer needs from start to finish without having to go next door or to a different place in order to do it. And that comes from what I think is probably one of the best RFQ engines that are out there. It is a multi-core engine that allows the customer, the user, to be able to handle the entire process directly from one screen, which to me is incredible. They can do it. They can back up and fix something. They can move forward to change it. But ultimately, it's one screen, one flow that helps them get from A to Z. But it's also tied to an inventory engine that allows them to be able to not just manage on-hand inventory, but catalogs, consignment, active or passive or both, depending on which one it is, so that they can better manage their business when they're listing on the marketplaces. So in a nutshell, that's my best description of what I think we offer the market.
Now, I would guess that you're leveraging your experience, right? So PartsBase is a parts listing service. There's some additional things to it than that. If we were getting a PartsBase elevator pitch, it would sound a little bit more broad than that. But ultimately, that's what the parts industry is using it for, is a listing service, a place to go and search and say, hey, there's inventory here. I'm going to go reach out to that person. So I assume you took your relationships of 15 years and you're saying, we understand a little bit about what the struggles are with those folks. What kind of struggles did you see there that you're helping solve as ERP?
That's a great question. I think for me, and if you allow me 10 seconds, I'll explain why. It sort of serves multiple purposes because my journey at PartSpace also included the go-to-market plan for a company that was called govgistics.com, which is now called PartSpace Government Data. And the reason I'm telling you that is because it gave me a lot of exposure, not just to aviation, but to aerospace and defense as a whole. So I can look at it from almost every single side. One of the things that I dealt with when I was dealing with defense contractors, aviation companies, aerospace manufacturers, and everybody in the middle were a lot of disconnected or disparate systems that really didn't speak with each other. And then when it came specifically down to aviation, we sort of saw that every single day in helping our customers find the right inventory, get the right inventory together, upload the inventory, while hearing stories about how many, for example, spreadsheets their inventory belongs in. And even if they have other catalogs or other consignment stock or a lot of other things, they were managing a lot of those capabilities independently and then in combination in order to be able to upload them. So one of the first benefits that really opened my eyes is our current ability to help the customer manage their business entirely so that they don't have to deal with 3 or 10 different spreadsheets to manage their inventory. They can connect via API connectivity to those marketplaces that we're talking about and have that two-way sync work on their behalf. But that's really just a small piece as far as I'm concerned in terms of everything that we can do. But I think that speaks specifically to your question, maybe a little bit more broad, but again, to your question.
So, well, what other bells and whistles really set ERP apart? I mean, there's a lot of inventory systems that exist out in the marketplace, and you've got some competitors there, some of which you've been around longer than I've been in the business. And what is it that's really setting you guys apart? What makes you guys special?
It's a tough and easy question at the same time, but the what I keep going back in when I'm talking to customers and prospective customers and everybody in between is the inclusion of everything that they need. So you're right. And I hate to oversimplify it like this, but there are a lot of tools out there that help you do A, B, and C. But in order for them to do D, E, F, and then X, Y, and so on, you need a third party service, you need a connection somewhere, you need some sort of integration. And unfortunately, with the way just the world turns, there is an associated cost with every single one of those components that I'm trying to talk about. So it's hard for me, in my opinion, to be able to serve my customer if I need them to buy something else to do it better or continue to manage spreadsheets. But specifically to your question, one of the things that I think sets us apart, number one, we are deep completely containing or have the ability to completely contain 100% of any and all compliance. All of that is built right into the DNA of ERP.aero. It's funny, I was at ASA last week, one of my first small shows, but one of the best shows that I've been at. And one of the questions that really carried a lot of weight, at least in my conversations, is whenever I ask the customer, or actually, and a prospective customer, where does your quality management system or QMS live? And 9 out of 10 of them absolutely had no answer. And I think it's a shame because I think that's one component of a true ERP system that allows any company to be able to manage not just its capabilities, but how it does things so they can continue to do it for the long term. So a lot of moving pieces, but more specifically to your question, I think it's also the compliance component of it.
So, does that mean that you guys are supporting, say, maybe a processed, mapped decision tree, and you guys are mapping that digitally for the clients? They so, hey, why are these items maybe not moving out? And you're saying, well, you can see the quality inspector's queue for the documentation. He's got 25 items in that queue, and it's bottlenecked because his dog got hit by a car this morning, so he's not in yet. So, okay, let's reassign somebody else in there, and then go check on his dog, make sure it's okay. But is that the type of service you're providing?
That's absolutely part of it. Absolutely. And no offense to anybody named Larry out there, but I always use Larry as an example. Not a single business or anything at that should rely on Larry being in the office every single day to make the process flow. In my opinion, that's part of the allure or the attraction or all of the above to basically one single source of truth. That would be a better description of your previous question is we allow our customers to have one single source of truth that allows the customer or the user or the company to be able to fully manage their business without relying on somebody and freaking out, for the lack of a better explanation, when that somebody is out of the office. So yes, it carries all of that work with it so that you can track every transaction from start to finish. You don't have to go into shared drives to find something. You don't have to rely on Control C and Control V and Control F to copy paste and find things that you're looking for. It just moves with you all the way from vendor quote to RFQ, all the way down to cash. So you're able to retain that entire life cycle so that you don't have to look for it anywhere else, especially when it comes to, auditors or anything where you really need your data.
That's fantastic. We've been in the same system since December of 2005, although the two systems look completely different to each other, obviously. The evolution of those things happen. Our current ERP provider, the technology didn't do everything we wanted it to do, and they couldn't provide us fast enough solutions. So we actually started building our own tools to serve that. And it sounds like you guys are creating an environment that instead of me having to have my own team of 4 or 5 people programming my own solutions, you guys are programming that for us, which is a great add-on. Yeah, I mean, you've got a lot of aviation time being around a lot of different companies that you served, customers you served. So you probably have seen a lot of those challenges that needed to be overcome and watch them all tackle them maybe a different way, right? Most of us as aviation owners and running these companies, I don't have a technology background. And so it's great that you do. And you had mentioned something to me previously when we were communicating on, maybe how technology in aviation is maybe a little bit misunderstood and misplaced. And maybe you can comment a little bit about your perspective on technology and aviation, kind of where we are today, and maybe how that springboards into what's coming next, which is, to me, is a really exciting future.
You're absolutely correct. I mean, throughout my career, at least for the last 20 years, I hardly ever met any single company or representative of a company that said they had everything. So a lot of companies, fortunately or unfortunately, can relate to the comment that you made about developing their own systems because X, Y, or Z. One of the reasons I'm confident about what we do and I carry the message willingly is because I've been around technology for a very long time. Without going into details, I've had exposure to other systems that we are currently competing with, some little, some a lot, and a lot of them in between. So I have an idea of where they excel. I have an idea of where I think we excel, and I have an idea about how to compare the two. So we step in and you provide that complete solution. One of the reasons being is we're also entirely built on an open API infrastructure, which means if it's not offered in there, we can either build it or connect to it. But based on my experience, and unless I am misremembering the numbers, we've got 64 or 65 modules that work as one and create those engines that we're talking about in order to help the customers. And where we don't excel, we actually provide connection to it. And what I mean by that is, there are accounting providers out there that do an excellent job at accounting functions. So instead of developing our own, we also integrate with them so that the companies that we're dealing with, regardless of who the provider is, can fully manage the revenue cycle or the revenue part of that equation. That's where I get a lot of my confidence, kind of putting all of those things together. So when I'm talking to somebody that tells me they have a perfect solution, I reference back to ASA last week and ask them an odd question and watch them not come up with an answer for it. Not because they don't know any better, but because they don't know that a better answer potentially exists. Kind of like, where does your QMS live? Or how many steps does it take to send an RFQ? Or how quickly can you connect to the marketplaces that we were talking about before? As I said, all providers do the same job. The difference is how well of a job they do, how efficient the job is, and ultimately what the return on investment is there for the customer. But ultimately, it's sort of an apples to apples comparison, but one apple is more ripe, the other apple is tastier, and it's just a matter of finding the right one for you. And I believe that's what we offer for the majority of the people that I personally dealt with.
So, from the future state of technology and where we're going, I had a conversation that we aired a couple of weeks ago, having discussions about blockchain technology. Everybody's talking about AI, and automated agents, and what that's going to do to the companies and their employees and their staff, and how the resources maybe can get redirected. Is there any part of that future technology that
Correct.
you're bullish on, Ralph, as an individual, as you see aviation moving forward? Which one of those things really do you think is going to have a maybe the next big impact? And then maybe again, what's the long term look like for these improved technologies in aviation?
That's really another good question, and it's near and dear to me. And I'm going to do my best to briefly explain to you why. Technology is changing super fast, and you have to adapt or you're going to get left behind. But that's easily said. What that takes usually takes a lot more work than what anybody, whether they are consumers or providers, are willing to admit. I didn't come up with this saying, but ultimately, technology, especially AI in this case, is a multiplier. What that means is if you have a solid foundation, if you have good pillars supporting you, if you have good flow and absolutely great architecture or design, AI is going to take you to the next level. But unfortunately, if none or only some of the previously mentioned components are in place, technology, and in this case, AI, is not going to take you forward. It's actually going to fast track the other direction. I wholeheartedly believe in that. I am not the technology expert, but I've been around it for a long time and I'm speaking from personal experience. And those are the actual components that are driving the future. It's easy to say AI, but AI built on what? So we continue to work on the foundation and the architecture in order to provide that single source of truth. But ultimately, we're doing it in a way that takes advantage of what I believe is our proper infrastructure and, again, architecture, if I may say that again. I think that's the only way to move forward. So things to expect out of our future, at least, is added technology, better flows, smarter research, machine learning components that are going to take you from A to B in a way that is currently inconceivable. And what that means is imagine having a sales floor and you've got 50 brokers or 50 people sitting on that sales floor. Ultimately, maybe 5 or 10% of them are going to be your superstars. Well, what if you can transfer that technology or at least that method of doing things to the other 45? So those are the things that are currently in process. Those are the things that we are developing, and those are the things that are going to help us move forward in a better way, in a stronger way that takes advantage of our foundation and history and allows us to do the things in the future that I believe will make us and force us to continue to get better and better and better. And a lot of that is driven by companies that we deal with. Our customers are our biggest advocates. A lot of the ideas that we come up with start with them and they grow from there because we listen, we go back and evaluate. It's not just a matter of having tech, it's a matter of having the right tech for the right moment at the right time, I believe.
This past weekend, I listened to a couple podcasts, and I'm very interested in the development and how the programming works for AI agents. And you could have them be everything from just an executive admin who handles some appointment infrastructure to some very complicated agents who manage video creation or can handle answering questions from your customer base. And we see these things already integrated in our everyday lives. I went to homedepot.com to buy something online, and the little agent popped up and said, "Hey, do you want to chat with me?" And I didn't need that, so I didn't use it, but it was there. And I think these are really powerful tools in an industry that honestly usually lacks some advanced technology because of the regulatory pieces. And I've discussed this before, but it can be a challenge. So I do think that the AI agent concept and this ability to take those next steps with that emboldens your ability as an owner. I would be able to take my staff and say, "Hey, I can program my agent to do these things, and then I could take my human resources and make sure I'm maintaining my human relationships with those folks." So maybe a program manager spends more time interfacing with their customer than spending their time, like you said, on the spreadsheets. Who needs 4 spreadsheets? I can have the bot create those and give me results. I can help analyze and give it further logic to drive hopefully a solution for this client who's maybe got some challenge that they can't quite overcome within their system. So I see that as one big step. And then again, I mentioned before, we did a podcast and had long discussions about blockchain technology, which is very intriguing to me, especially when it comes to the quality side that you were discussing. if we could have our trace rules for our ASA, if we had those rules set in the blockchain, and then we followed those rules within the blockchain, or maybe it's through our dismantle AFRA certification, but we would take those things and those would be entered in there, and then they live there forever, right? And you talked about that immutable truth, and that's what that blockchain would do. Now, has ERP taken a look at anything like blockchain, or maybe you can't discuss that. Maybe it's super secret. But I would be intrigued if that was a direction that you were looking at, because I do think that there's a real solution there that the market's probably thirsty for.
Number one, for what it's worth, I agree with the points that you just made. The short answer to your question, without getting into details, is yes. But not just on that level. I think it has applications throughout the supply chain management cycle that would help the individual or the vendor or everybody in between better be able to make sure that it's the correct part, or it's the original part, or this paperwork does tie back to the original source, or anything in between. So the short answer is yes, but that's part of an ever-evolving sort of development playground. For the lack of a better explanation, I think our roadmap currently is filled for the next 36 to 42 months. It's funny to say it that way, because it's always filled for the next 36 to 48 months on average. And some of it is concrete and goes into further development for ultimate deployment. Others, maybe we find out that was the wrong direction, so we sort of exit out of there and replace it with something that we think is going to be more powerful. So yes, the short question is it is part of the roadmap, but the long-term question is when or how. Those are always
Well, if you build enough AI agents, maybe you can compress that down into maybe a 24-month window. So you gotta look at how fast can I go if I get a bunch of those little bots working in the background to do a lot of the work that your team is doing. Again, I would agree. You commented something earlier that AI is going to provide us a higher level of productivity, not just because of what the AI is doing, but because how we get to redeploy the human capital resources that you do have. Those resources get to be more effective, and they can accomplish a lot more because the tools at their fingertips. Everybody's worried about AI. There will be some jobs that will be programmable, and the value of the individual contributor as an employee is actually going to grow, because they're going to be able to accomplish a lot more. Just like you said, with a salesperson, if I could grab the behavior model of my top 5 salespeople and program that, maybe those top 5 salespeople have bots underneath them that are helping them with modeling their same behavior and their same patterns, and all of a sudden you've got a sales force that works differently. So I do think there's a lot there, certainly, with that technology. From a digital payment platform, I'm also curious, when, and maybe this is a question that we don't even need to answer today, but I'm curious of when we're going to start seeing more regular payments made through digital format. And because of some of the regulatory challenges or intertrade commerce challenges with other countries, where they're saying, hey, we need to make sure that this payment's coming through, that it's got, that we can track this to make sure the money is going to the right places in the world. I'll be curious to see if that becomes a digital solution, and I suspect that it has the opportunity to do that.
I agree. For what it's worth, I agree. The opportunity is there. It's just a matter of getting all of the right governmental bodies or agencies or people in between to talk on the same page. Again, I refer back to last week at ASA. I had a chance to speak with somebody who was representing EASA. And while he was completely open that they do communicate with the FAA, for example, not exactly what you were talking about, but I'm going to get to it. He also said that there are meetings that take place that neither side is sort of invited to. They just find out about the results afterwards. And I think the same thing is happening on the financial side. So I do believe that in the coming years, there will be a shift to the payment methodologies that you just talked about. I think we're closer, and I think some of it has taken place, but we're not quite there yet. But I believe it's also a matter of how we can get A and B to finally talk with each other, so that there's not 18 steps in between them in order to do that. Whether that takes another 2 years or 8 years or some number in between, I don't know. But I think from a long-term perspective, that's going to be available in the
Yeah.
short term.
And again, we'll shrink that timeline by attacking it with AI agents. Well, just like our own little personal squad of AI agents. They make everything faster. Ralph, it's been fantastic so far. Every one of the folks that come onto my podcast, my listeners always like to hear the question about what their favorite aircraft is and why. So maybe you can enlighten us on your experience.
My initial answer is there's a lot, but if I had to pick one, it'd be the F-35 or the F-135 engine. I think this might sound weird, but I think as a whole, it's just one sexy beast. But when you look under the hood, figuratively speaking, and find out what's going behind it, from either vertical takeoff or regular takeoff purposes, that engine is a powerhouse. And I'd be hard pressed to find something else that could deliver the versatility of that engine and even the craft. So it's the F-135 engine all day long.
I like that. Have you been lucky enough to be around a live flight of one of those aircraft?
No, not the F-35, the F-22. Yes, I remember one of my first road trips when I was with Parts Base was to the reserve base in Fort Worth. I had a chance to take a look at some of those aircrafts, but not the F-35 at the time. I live for the day where I can just look at one sitting right in front of me, but it's on my screensaver, it's on my phone, and I look at it maybe a little bit more often than I should, but I think it's amazing. Besides the technology, I think its full capabilities are amazing.
Well, that's awesome. I'm very, very lucky that my sister and I have season Chiefs tickets. So usually the closest I get to a military aircraft is a flyover at Arrowhead Stadium as they complete the national anthem, and we get these amazing flyovers, which can oftentimes be a highlight. Back when we were terrible, that was probably the highlight of the day, and now that we're pretty fantastic, just emboldens that day a little bit more. So it also sounds like, I did a little background work. You spent a large part of your parts-based career uh, on the military side. Is there really some big differential that you could point out or that sticks out to you between the military and commercial side of aviation itself and or the military side versus commercial side of this technology usage that you're working through?
I think there's going to be a lot of people that are going to raise their eyebrows at what I'm about to say, but I think both of them are the different side of the same coin. I think they're both after the same thing. I think they're serviced by some of the same companies, just different divisions. Some of the differences that I've seen is that in terms of regulatory compliance and other new requirements that went into place in defense, especially around 2015 or 2016, like CMMC, which evolved to 1.0 to 2.0 and eventually still ongoing in terms of a process. While there are equivalent regulations on the commercial side that can quote unquote compete with that, I think that on the military side, they're probably a little bit more used to it. But I think as the actual as time goes by, as life goes on, I think it'll become synonymous with both again. Again, they're both trying to accomplish the same thing. They both want to get from A to B. They both want to serve a market that is in desperate need of good service, which again is why I go back and I put it as different sides of the same coin.
Is there a particular challenge that those companies, is sort of a common challenge that they struggle to provide the service that those end users are really looking for?
I think so. Yes, that's what I did from 2009 to 2022, right before I left. And in terms of trying to find the jobs, I think that's a big differentiator. When it comes to the federal government, specifically the DoD, there is absolutely no centralized location where you can go and find what to bid on and what to work on. So on the military side, everybody's relegated to going to 5, 6, 8 different places in order to find the work that they need to do, as in open solicitations and then research the backgrounds of all those parts. I don't think that's something that currently exists, at least that deeply on the commercial side, but ultimately that's one of the other differentiators that I think I'd go back on, just the manner by which they do the business, even though they're both going from
Yeah.
A to B.
We've avoided at Jet Midwest involving ourselves heavily in the military side because of that challenge. Because it's like we haven't been doing it, and to start that from scratch, everybody that we've talked to is it can be a daunting task, and it does behave differently. And how do you teach an old dog like me new tricks? Forget that. Maybe I'll write an AI bot for it and then do it. But until I do that, I don't think I want to jump into shark infested waters without some better direction. So
In my experience, is not as easy as some might think, but it's definitely not as difficult at what some might think as well. The truth is somewhere in the middle. It is a different animal to start with, getting certain certifications out of the way, certain registrations out of the way, but ultimately, once you achieve that, and that could be done real quickly, the rest of it would be very, very close to what
Yeah,
you guys
that's
are doing right now.
good to know. And again, I'll program that bot to do that for me. I'm getting too old to learn new tricks. So, Ralph, we've talked quite a bit about ERP.aero, and maybe you can give us a little bit of a flavor of what type of customer does ERP serve? From an aviation standpoint, it's parts companies, MROs, manufacturers, operators, or or does this go outside of aviation? Maybe give us an idea of who you guys are really serving.
You're definitely right. The dot arrow means we're in aviation, but we're nowhere near saying that if you want to fly, we've got the right solution. I think we have a blend of customers between suppliers, MROs, and manufacturers and companies in between. But the area in which we thoroughly excel is aviation suppliers. We have taken that workflow to the nth degree. And that comes from the background or the origin story of ERP.aero. It was founded by two gentlemen that had been in aviation for 15 and 20 years, respectively. They used every single platform that existed until the time that this company was founded and could not find the right solution. And they finally built it initially for themselves, but then after they had the MVP or minimum viable product, realized that there's an absolute demand for this type of solution. As I alluded to before, every ERP takes you from A to B, but the banner by which ERP.aero gets you there, I think, is a differentiator as well as a separator between it and any other workflows. Which is one of the reasons why we excel tremendously at what I mentioned before is helping aviation suppliers, whether they're distributors, brokers, or any kind of company.
That's amazing. You know what? That's a great origin story of probably how a lot of technology is advanced. And I've got a good friend of ours, John Dazuba at Dossie, and uh, John was so frustrated. I don't know how many years ago, 20 years ago, he just wrote his own. Guy's a genius. He just went in, he wrote his own code and created his own platform to serve exactly the needs of his company. It sounds like you've done the same thing. The difference is John didn't sell his; he kept it to himself. He wouldn't even tell me how it worked. It was terrible. Anyway, that's okay. I can forgive him for that. He's built an amazing company, and I'm super happy for where he's going in his career. I'll catch him someday. So as we talk about technology moving forward and evolving, what will the human factor be? From your perspective, maybe not even an ERP arrow, but from your perspective, what's going to be the human being's role as we see all these technologies continue to evolve and get more significant?
There's going to be some changes. Let me put it to you this way, and this is the best way that I can. With the advancement of every technology historically, there are some things that become obsolete, other things that sort of take their place, but everything in between, I think, is exponentially improved as a result of that technology. When we're talking specifically about aviation and the technology that we're involved in, I think the answer is going to be the same technology, bots, AI, whatever you want to call it, or whichever component you want to talk about, will sometimes replace certain jobs. But in my personal opinion, I think the long term impact will be how it augments what we do, what anybody does at that, and how well we can improve it. Now, let me tell you a short story. So, I've been in sales for a very, very long time, technology sales, and then aviation and defense. And when I was leading teams before I started leading companies, when I was leading teams, I was looking for a way to replicate my top producers. And I think the same logic can be applied in this case. It's not a matter of replacing, because in my opinion, there is no replacement. You can't tell me otherwise to that human factor in order to keep moving forward. But technology can be programmed and taught to take that excellence and apply it across the board. And if you have a boardroom full of traders or anything similar to that, and you make each of them 10%, 30%, or more better, the only thing that's going to happen is you're going to make more revenue, they're going to make a better income, and your margins are going to kick butt. So ultimately, I think it augments the processes and it'll help improve a lot of things with some of the outstanding dangers aside that
Yeah,
they
the
do mostly.
if the Terminator comes knocking at my door, I'm blaming you. Well, maybe. Listen, I actually completely agree with you. I think that you're correct that our technology will help bolster it, and there really is a need for human factor. In fact, a great example of that is I was on a road trip this past weekend. I wanted to go and get myself a cheeseburger, and I went into McDonald's, and they had 6 kiosks that were unused, and nobody was standing in line. I walked right past 6 kiosks where I could have done my own order and went and talked to the gal at the front so that I could give her my order, which was a better experience for me. So even though there was technology there, had there been 10 people in line, I would have used the technology to speed up my order. But when I had a choice between two even things, I would much rather talk to a human being. And I think that's probably not uncommon for the marketplace. And there really is a place for us to have people interfacing with people.
For what it's worth, completely agree. Like I said, it'll augment a lot of things. And as a result, each of us could be better for it. Not necessarily
Absolutely.
replaced by it, but just be better for it.
You mentioned the F-35 is your favorite aircraft. Is there a particular passion or a particular event that happened in your life that made the F-35 that thing that just stuck out so well for you?
Indirectly, yes. We talked a little bit about the things that I've done in my previous journey, how that involved me or gave me the exposure to military and defense. We had a customer at the time whose brother was an F-35 pilot, and I heard a lot of stories through the brother every single time I talked to them. I don't remember what trade show it was, but there was one time where I met him and his brother was with him, and the amazing stories that he was able to share. You can tell by the look on his face, the feeling that it gave him, the exhilaration and the sense of prowess, if I can use that word, in terms of being a pilot within that craft. And as I said earlier, I've never physically seen or touched an F-35. I used to be a big F-22 fan. I've seen those. But after hearing the stories and after hearing the way that he talked about it, it just automatically made me a big believer. And then I started following it. As I mentioned, I've got pictures of it. And I just think it's absolutely phenomenal how we can get a piece of hardware to do the exact same things that engine is
Yeah,
capable of
yeah, it
doing.
really
I think
is.
it's amazing.
I'm not an engineer, but I am wowed by the things that the engineers have been able to accomplish when given the freedom to go and experiment and create those things. I have a lot of respect for what they do. So, Ralph, as we kind of wind down, I would give all of my guests opportunity if there's a great aviation story or something you wanted to elaborate on a little bit more. Give everybody the opportunity to do that. So, is there a particular aviation story that maybe sticks out that you think our listeners would love to hear about?
There's 2. One of them takes me back to when I was 12 years old, and it's related to aviation because I was in the middle of it, but that's when, we traveled at the time, my mom, my dad, and my sister, and one of the first trips that I took was a flight overseas, transatlantic flies, and even at that age, the feeling of being inside this machine that is able to take us to places the way that this was taking us was amazing, not to mention its design and relative comfort. That's the first story that sort of got me to think about it a little bit. And the second one is a little bit more personal. I think I was 21 or 22 years old. Don't hate me for this. I don't remember the name of the plane, but that was the first time I jumped out of an airplane. We went up, the door opened. I almost lost it. And then I had a couple of people with me, including the instructor that I was strapped to, that sort of made it a lot easier. And I remember falling backwards and looking up at that airplane as it started getting smaller, 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 and smaller. And I thought to myself, without that airplane, there's no way that I can do this other than just maybe going up in a hot air balloon and jumping. But I probably wouldn't do that even if you paid me. But those two things together sort of got me involved in it. I moved away from it a little bit in my life as my career then changed, but by dumb luck or by design or a combination of the two, I was put back into it in 2007. That sort of allowed me to reintroduce myself to it and eventually sort of falling in love with the hustle, if I can use that word, with the action, with everything that's going on, because I think aviation at the same time is one of the tightest, close-knit communities there is, and it's absolutely huge at the same time. And how those two seemingly polar things go together, I have no idea, but I learned a long time ago, sort of
Yeah,
the question.
we've all heard of the 7 degrees of Kevin Bacon, right? Aviation is about the same. I think if we talk about how many degrees you have to get away to have the whole aviation marketplace known, it's not very many. And I would agree with you, but it's massive.
Correct.
When we go to these trade shows, all kinds of trade shows all over the world, and
It's huge.
just tens of thousands of people, and every one of them has their own nuanced piece that they're contributing to this marketplace. And you have to take all of those shows, 25 or 30 shows a year, maybe more, combine all that together, and it really is just one massive community. And without any one segment of that, you have a piece of it that would suffer. And to your point just a second ago, you're absolutely correct that this business is about the hustle, and not in a negative way. It's about hard work, seeing a problem and solving a problem. And that really is, from a parts guy's perspective and a trader, that really is what we're doing. There's a need in the marketplace, and I'm going to fulfill that need. And companies like ERP.aero sounds like they're creating the API and the connectivity to make that job a little more efficient and a little bit better for both the user and the customer on the other side. So we appreciate the fact you guys are making the world a little bit better for all of us.
Thank you. We try every single day. That's where the motivation and the heart comes from. We come up with some ideas, the customers come up with the other ideas, and usually the right answer is somewhere in the middle, and it's just a matter of whether or not we want to go find it. But 99 out of 100 times, we chase it. We narrow it down, we build it, we deploy it, we perfect it.
That's great.
Make sure
I appreciate you guys connecting the dots for us. Well, Ralph, thank you so much for joining me on the Nose to Tail podcast. And for all you listeners out there, be sure to like and subscribe, and we'll see you next week.
Thank you for listening to our podcast, Nose to Tail. Please like and subscribe to our channel. Presented by Jet Midwest.